Here's what I take to be the central question of American politics in the coming years: how do you hold together, much less govern, a country undergoing as much demographic change as our own? In 2013, America passed a milestone. A majority of infants under 3 were non-white. The Census Bureau thinks the whole nation will follow by 2045. In most states, white deaths now outnumber white births. And it's not just race. The percentage of foreign-born Americans is nearing a record high. The percentage of non-religious Americans has been rising for decades. America is changing, and it's changing fast. People feel that. And everything we know about identity and politics suggests this kind of transition will push America into a fragile and even dangerous place. Look at Donald Trump and the ideas that powered his rise. This transition has already pushed America into a fragile and even dangerous place. Slowing massive demographic change is not fascist, it's conservative, warns Andrew Sullivan. But the United States is far from the first polity to undergo these changes. So rather than looking to the country's future with concern, it's worth looking to some of the places that have traveled this road already, and done so successfully. California, the most populous state in the Union, traveled this path in the 1990s, and not without turbulence. This was the era of Governor Pete Wilson, of the harshly anti-immigrant Prop. 187 and protests and Supreme Court cases against affirmative action. But the state held together, and far from being ripped apart by the browning of its population, it remains successful, proud, vibrant, and governable. Its diversity has become part of its soul, part of California's idea of itself. Within California, Los Angeles stands out both for its particular size and demographics. LA has about 4 million people, making it more populous than 23 states, and it's the 3rd biggest city in the world by GDP. According to recent census numbers, non-Hispanic whites now make up about 30% of the population, while Hispanics and Latinos make up 47%, Asians make up 11%, and African Americans make up 10%. If population change is truly an existential threat to a polity, LA should have cracked apart long ago. Eric Garcetti is the mayor of LA. He's its first Jewish mayor and its second Mexican-American mayor. He was re-elected in 2017 with a stunning 81% of the vote. I've always found him to be unusually thoughtful on questions of diversity and national identity, perhaps because of the place he lives and works, and perhaps because of how many of those questions are bound up in his own biography. I sat down with Garcetti in his office last week. A transcript of our conversation, edited for length and clarity, follows. Our full conversation, which includes much more on LA's homelessness crisis, among other topics, can be heard on my podcast, The Ezra Klein Show. We're speaking amidst Trump's child separation crisis, which manages to merge both the administration's policy toward immigrants and toward refugees. Walk me through how your family history intersects with these issues. I'm a typical American, which is to say, like all of us, a mix of different things. On my father's side, my grandfather, Salvador, was born in Mexico. He was 1 year old when he lost his father during the Mexican Revolution. And my abuela, my great-grandmother, literally picked him up and started walking, like a parent does to try to save their child. And she went through the border between Mexico and the United States in El Paso, and then eventually got all the way to Los Angeles. What sort of life would they have had if my grandfather had been ripped out of his mother's arms and they had been separated? On my mom's side, they lived in the western part of the Russian Empire where Jews were allowed to live. And yet those Jews were victims of pogroms and forced conscription. The various great-grandparents on my mom's side all came fleeing that oppression. That's what America's been. A place that has been welcoming to the refugee, to the person who's oppressed. Our darkest chapters are those in which we've closed our borders. There are some in the country right now who see rising diversity, a rising non-white population, a rising foreign-born population, and they see that diversity as a strength. And there are people in the country who look at that same thing and feel that something is being taken away from them. They feel that there is a change happening too fast